Welcome back to Shoop Sports, everybody, with another edition of our season reviews and off-season previews. You know, there are many quote-unquote dumpster fire organizations in sports, and that term gets thrown around so loosely, I don't even think people know what it means anymore. But if you want to find a definition of a dumpster fire organization, you got one right here. Yes, the Houston Texans are a relatively new franchise. They've only been around about 20 years. They're the youngest franchise in the NFL, but that doesn't save them from the incompetency of their ownership. The incompetency started a couple years ago when they traded DeAndre Hopkins for a washed-up David Johnson and a second-round pick, which really set the fans and the quarterback at the time, Mr. Pedophile up here, he got set off too and demanded a trade. Well, it turns out he had let's put it way too many to the count, allegations against him. So this offseason, he got traded for a couple of first-round picks, beginning the Texans rebuild. Now, for Texans fans, great, they finally got something for the quarterback, but what about going into this season? Any hope whatsoever? Well, what are they doing at quarterback? Well, they're bringing back Davis Mills for another season. He did fine at the end of 2021, so I guess it's worth giving him a shot. I mean, it's not like they had a first-round pick anyway to make up for it. Then who do you bring on as your head coach? Lovie Smith? Talk about uninspiring. I mean, for season ticket holders, instead of giving them season tickets, you might as well have handed them a slip that said, "We'll see you in 2023. Good luck this season." Who knows? Maybe there is some hope. After all, they signed Brandon Cooks to a big deal. Seems like he wants to be a part of the organization. Nothing could go wrong with that, right? So the season begins, and the Texans actually have to jump off to a 20-3 lead against the Indianapolis Colts, which did not last very long. The Texans end up getting a tie, which is great news, meaning they won't go 0-17. So, how the rest of this season go? Well, they beat the Jaguars a few weeks later, bringing the record to 1-3-1, and it was kind of downhill from there. Teams just trampled them all season in the run. It seemed like every running back that went against the Texans had their best game this season. Josh Jacobs and Derrick Henry were absolute monsters, really inflated their stats in the year. Well, the Texans were just, let's call them the garbage time heroes. The Texans would go down by at least 20 points every game and would put up stats in the fourth quarter to make themselves not look as incompetent as they really are. Unfortunately, the incompetency wasn't just in the games itself. Brandon Cooks, remember him? Yeah, remember that big deal he signed? Well, he didn't get the memo that the Texans were a tanking team and threw a temper tantrum within the locker room and didn't play towards the trade deadline, adding speculation that he would be traded until he wasn't. So he sat out even more games and then decided to play much later in the season, once it was already established, okay, he's not going anywhere. You might as well try to audition for other teams at this point, I guess. And remember Davis Mills, the quarterback they were going to give a chance to? Yeah, so much for believing in him. They switched to Kyle Allen mid-season, which is very peculiar because we all know what we have in Kyle Allen, which is a mediocre journeyman quarterback. And then they started giving snaps to Jeff Driscoll, trying to make the next Taysom Hill, but if Taysom Hill is Bud Light, then Jeff Driscoll is what you find in the Costco aisle. It gets even worse for the Texans too. The Texans at this point have not much to play for. They're 1-11. What they have to play for is the first overall pick. But first, a rematch against Deshaun Watson, the guy that betrayed the franchise, demanded a trade, committed all of those heinous acts. It was time for revenge. The defense stepped up in the biggest game of the season, but the offense did not. That's right, the Browns had 3 touchdowns, none of them by Deshaun Watson. So good job rattling him, I guess, but rest of the team did not get the memo. The Texans get blown out by double digits despite not allowing offensive TD. They then proceed to play both the Cowboys and the Chiefs and play them down to the freaking wire, nearly winning both games, but luckily for the fans at the time, they showed excitement but pulled off the loss in the end. Number 1 pick. We're still on track, baby. Big game against the Titans. Oh shoot, they won. They beat Malik Willis. Somehow there's a quarterback worse than Davis Mills. Well, it's okay. You're still in line for the number 1 pick. I mean, gotta get another win to make the fans happy. So let's go back to losing ways. Yeah, that's more like it. Okay, one more game. Don't mess this up. Conversations with Lovie Smith before the game. What could this be about? They can't be firing him before the last game of the season. Oh no. This can't be right. This can't be right. How could they do this? I mean, okay, surely Lovie Smith still cares enough to get this franchise the number 1 pick after they paid him a salary the whole year. And that, my friends, is the story of how the Texans remain the most incompetent organization in the NFL. Well, maybe besides the Browns. Lots of needs for the Texans. Let's start with quarterback. So, they messed it up. They had Bryce Young fall into their laps, and they messed it up. But they're still going to have to find a quarterback somehow, and I don't know any free agents that's going to want to come here, so draft it is. So the hope is that you get Bryce Young to fall to you now, although I really think some team will trade up to the number 1 slot. So looks like you're ending up with CJ Stroud there. Not a bad consolation prize. It's just kind of like you're in a cookie competition and the winner gets a bag of Oreos and the loser gets the Walmart brand. Okay, next, wide receiver. Okay, Mr. Cook, so you want out. Okay, whatever, it's your decisions, whatever, but regardless, the Texans are going to have to replace him as the number 1 receiver. I mean, Nico Collins, he's alright, but he's the number 2 guy. The Texans do have the number 12 overall pick, so there's a couple options that they could take a wide receiver. But on the defensive side, though, they need a lot on defense. First of all, D tackle and linebacker. Their run game, literally bottom of the league, 32nd in the league. Getting gashed all season. If Bryce Young goes number 1, as they're not smitten on any of the quarterbacks in number 2, I could see them taking Jalen Carter. I mean, they need a franchise quarterback, but Carter would immensely help the run game, which was like their biggest weakness. And then, of course, they need a franchise linebacker, someone who could lead a defense like a Luke Kuechly could and just turn that defense around. Although those are hard to find, so good luck trying to find that. They could also use some pass rushers. There's a lot of good pass rushers in this draft. They might look there for their number 12 pick, or maybe at the number 33, whichever one works. They could also use some O-line help. Maybe they look for a potential Laramie Tunsil replacement down the road, but regardless, it's this Texas team has so many needs. But most of all, what they need is just some excitement. I mean, they had a little bit of excitement towards the end of the year, but is it really that exciting when all the fans really want that number 1 pick? Yeah, well, good luck to you, Texans fans. Whoever's out there in Texas, not a Cowboys fan, Godspeed. And we'll see you next time on Troop Sports for another off-season